Hey everyone, welcome to part 5 of my series of tutorials on Blender. Loaded the blend file that we had last time. It should look something like this. Resize this. Oops, did it in the wrong spot. There we go. I actually like to keep this numpad 3. I'll hit 5 to get orthoscopic view, and numpad 7 for this one, which is where it is. As you can see, the origin of the monkey is still on his ear. So I'm going to snap the cursor to put it in edit mode with tab, select all. With the A key, snap cursor to selected, which is now in the middle of the monkey. I'll hit tab to get out of edit mode, Control Alt Shift C, origin to 3D cursor. Now the center of the monkey is exactly where it should be, the origin. I went through all of this in the last video, or the one before, I can't remember. Okay, now this time we're going to start off with actually doing some real modeling. So I took that time to do the stuff with the monkey, and we're eventually going to get rid of him. But first I'll talk a little bit about extrude. Extrude is really really how you build a model. So I'm going to go into edit mode, and I'm going to select one panel, say this one, and I'm going to hit E to extrude. So you see it created a face, and it basically extruded out of the mesh. So I can left click to when I'm satisfied with it, but then at that point I can grab it, move it around, rotate it, and size it down or up. So I just gave the monkey a horn, if you will. If I hit E again, it extrudes it even beyond that, and I can hit E again. As you can see, you can keep extruding until you're happy with what you have. That looks a little funky, eh? And that is really how you build things. And you can extrude faces. You can extrude lines. You see, if I extrude this line, just the line portion of it came out. I don't ever generally do that, but it's there if you need it. And you can extrude single vertices if you like. Just select one, hit E, and you can see there's a new vertex right there. So let's go back to 1, and I'll hit tab and I'll delete the monkey. Hit Shift C to center the cursor, Shift A to add, and I'll just add a basic cube. Now, oops, I'm going to shift middle mouse to move into the middle here. I'll size it down a little bit. So when you start modeling, you're essentially going to take various faces and extrude them. I hit E, and just like sizing or grabbing, I can control which axis I want it to go along. X or Z or Y. So I'll just go Z here. Now I'll take this side panel here and I'll extrude it along the X plane. And that's essentially how you start building models. Now I'm going to show you more about loop cuts and stuff later, where you can actually make cuts inside of models or inside of meshes, but until then we'll just continue to extrude. So as you can see, that doesn't look like much, but it's the beginnings of something. So now that we have a very basic mesh, there's a couple things I can talk about. So like I said, when you extrude, you can go along the axis, then you can size it to whichever you want, and you can size it like I showed in previous videos, towards the cursor or just towards the median point, bounding box they call it. You can rotate it. If I go to top view, I can rotate it more along the top view, grab it, and do whatever you like. Now you can also constrain it with the XYZ axis once it's selected, X, Z, or Y. The Z will always keep it, if you're extruding up, Z's always the best one to use. Now let's say, for example, that I created this, but I wanted this row of vertices and this row of vertices to be exactly along the X-axis. So the way that I could do that is I could use the B tool to select them. Oh, you can see the backs aren't selected. So remember, we have to shut this off. I'll go back to 1 and I'll reselect everything. Now we can see the backs are collected. Now if I hit size, they're just going to come towards each other, and that's not what I want. But if I constrain it to the Z axis, you can see that they line up perfectly. And if you want to know for sure, look at the number in the bottom left corner here. Hold your control button And when your control button's down to 0, these are now exactly aligned along the x-axis, which is what I was looking for. Now, I'll hit Control Z to undo that, but let's say I wanted them to be, this set of vertices to be along this axis. Well, the way I would do that is I would select a vertices, I would snap the cursor to that vertices, then I would select these vertices, I go down here and say 3D cursor. Now when I size, it's going to go towards there, but if I size Z, holding down the control key until I get 0 on the bottom left, and they are now once again perfectly aligned along the x-axis, which is what I was looking for. I use that trick all the time to make sure things are aligned properly, and like I said, you can align a group of vertices together along the z-axis, or you can put your cursor somewhere and have them align towards the cursor itself. If I were to move the cursor to here, select them all, size. If I don't choose Z, then you can see here it's doing craziness. But if I hit Z, it'll line it right up, and that's what we're looking for. Now you can actually delete faces, lines, and vertices with varying effects. So if I delete a line right here, watch what happens. All of the stuff around it disappears, and the reason being that anything attached to it, these two vertices, obviously has to go with it. This face, this face, this face. So like I said, when you see it disappear, it's a lot of stuff that goes with it. If you select just one vertices and you do the same, you can see that anything that was connected to this vertices, any points, go with it. Shift C to center, Shift A and plane. Now I'm going to delete one vertex here. That leaves me 3 vertices, and you can actually fill in faces yourself. If you hit F, that fills in this face, and you can fill in a face that has 3 or 4 vertices. So if I hit, to duplicate something is Shift D, so I'll hit Shift D and create this 4th vertices, and if I select all 4 of them, hit F, I'll have my plane back. So this can come in handy for a lot of various things. You just have to remember that you can only do you can only press F if there's 3 or 4 vertices. I'll go back to the front. I'll add my monkey again. So if you wanted to extrude here, see I made kind of a inside window. I'll grab Y to get rid of it. Now let's say I got rid of this vertices. I know it's kind of difficult to see what's going on here. I could select these 3 and hit F, and I'll get a nice fill. I could actually select these 4 and hit F. It's really ugly. There's a gap there and there's a gap there. But you may eventually come to a point where you want to, I've often had to tear out a bunch of vertices and then reconstruct them for one reason or another. And the only thing you have to remember is you can only do it with 3 or 4 points. Now, that being said, you should always go for 4 points and never go for 3 points. And I will show you why. Go back here. Let's add our plane again, size it down. So that let me talk about subdividing, and then I'll explain why 4 points is better than 3. If you hit the W key and you select subdivide, it does exactly that. It subdivides into 4 pieces. If you hit it again, it subdivides it again, and you can keep going on and on. So watch what happens when I have a 3-point face and I subdivide it. That's really not good. That's not subdividing very well at all. 3-point faces don't subdivide very well and makes it more difficult to work with them. So you should always do 4-point. You should do your best to make sure all of your points are 4-point. All of your faces are 4-point. I'm just going to erase this. Now we're going to talk about the subdivide modifier. I've already shown it a little bit. So hit the little wrench there, modifiers. Go down to add modifier and subdivision surface. Now you remember when I used the W key to select subdivide? Well, this modifier does almost the same thing, except that it doesn't apply it right away. So first I'm going to go into tab, select all, and go down and hit smooth shading. I talked about that earlier. So now this subdivide has been added to this mesh, and you can see if I turn it to 0, that's what the mesh used to look like. If I set it to 2, let's say, it's nice and smooth. And you have two options here: view, which is what I'm seeing in this window, and render, which is what it's going to look like when we actually render it into a scene. So I like to keep this at 3 and this at 2 or even 1. And like I said, I like to press this modifier button here, and it allows me to sort of see the subdivision right on the model, as opposed to when I don't have it off and you see the sort of the outline. I prefer it this way. It's completely your choice, of course. So I use subdivision all the time, as you would imagine. You know what it comes in handy for is making things look really smooth and organic. So here's a cube. I'll just extrude it on the x-axis. I'll extrude it again along the x-axis. Extrude this top panel along the z-axis. So let's say I was starting to build a car. So that's a pretty bad looking car, a little too blocky. So I could go to subdivision surface. I could select all and go smooth, if I can find it. I know it's in here somewhere, probably right in front of me. Yep. And now if I change view to 2, 3, turn this on, you can see it's starting to look more like a car or a sub. Now I'm going to show you a little later loop cuts, which will allow you to do cool things like this. See, now that's starting to look more like a car. But the great thing about this subdivider is subdivision is that it's not permanent right now. So if I click the eyeball, that's actually what the model is right now. It's the block. So you can see that you can do a lot of work with the model before you actually do any before you actually commit to the subdivide. Because once you click apply, that's it. Oh, it can't be applied in edit mode. So once you click apply, that's it. The subdivider is gone, and now the subdivision has been applied to your model, and that's just a great big old mess. So what you want to do is just leave the modifier in place and do your work at a more basic level on the model itself. So I got rid of the block car thing I made. I'm going to talk a little bit about using size down and removing doubles, as they call it. Let me just add a cube. Size that down. Now I'll get rid of this face. So now I have a box basically. Now I'm gonna hit Shift D to duplicate this, move it along the Z-axis. I'm gonna rotate it 100. Oops, I don't want that. I want this. I'm gonna rotate it 180 degrees. You can see in the bottom left I'm at 180. Now let's say I wanted to attach these two boxes. That means these vertices need to all be connected. So the way that I could do that is I could snap my cursor to the selected. Then I could go to this one and set it to cursor 3D cursor. Oops. Size along the Z-axis. And voila. The only problem is, oops, if you don't count the fact that I forgot the back parts. So now, the only problem is these two meshes aren't really the same mesh to begin with, so I can't join them. I will join them. I'll talk more about that in another video. So now these meshes are actually joined together. They're part of the same mesh, but they're still not connected. If I can grab one or the other. I'll show you what I did to do that in another video as well. So what I want to do now is I want these vertices to be connected together, and the way that we do that is by doing what we call remove doubles. And what remove doubles essentially does is when you click on it, and the button's right here, is it'll find vertices that are close together and basically melt them into one vertices. And in this particular case, they're right on top of it. So when you click it, sorry, I had to change the top bar to the info bar because it's important. So when you click remove doubles, you'll see it appears here, remove 0 vertices. The reason why it says 0 right now is because I did it about 10 seconds ago when I was trying to fix something off screen. So it would have said remove 4 vertices, and if you click, you can see now that those vertices are joined, that this is actually one mesh and not two pieces of one mesh. You're going to use that quite a bit as well. There are times when you're going to, want to attach a side or a face to something exactly, and then you want to get rid of the vertices so that when you're, when I move this, I don't want one piece of it to move and the other piece of it to stay still. There's also other things you can use it for. There's a rotate option right here, and you can use it to say make a plate, and when it comes around to the top of the plate, the original mesh and the new mesh will be on top of each other, and so you would just highlight the whole thing, say remove doubles, and it would all just mesh together. I'm going to show a little bit about that in a future video as well. So anyway, that's it for this video. The extrude stuff, my final episode, I'm going to kind of do a quick mesh building episode, and you'll see a lot of the extrude, but essentially what you need to do is decide what you want to build and go into face mode if you like, and just start extruding. If this was, say this was the top of a car, I don't know, any kind of car, say at the front I wanted it to be a little narrower, then I could go to I could extrude it down, and then I could size it a little bit. Oops, I want to switch this to bounding. Size it a little bit, or maybe it's the beginning of a train. Extrude it on the z-axis, on the y in this particular case, and that's the beginnings of a train. So, the possibilities are endless, and that's basically the way that that's the way you start most meshes, is just by basically extruding, using subdivide, and then extruding some more, removing faces, extruding inward, extruding outward, and so on and so forth. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I'll see you in part 6.